Welcome. This video will summarize recent changes made to the FCF DDS Group Home Design Guidelines. I'm Sarah McKeever, Director of Supportive Housing at CDAC. CDAC manages the FCF program on behalf of the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, or EOHLC, in partnership with the Department of Developmental Services and the Department of Mental Health. FCF was established in 1993 to help finance the development of community-based housing for individuals receiving services through DDS and DMH. The original design guidelines for homes serving DDS residents were developed in 2006. And since that time, we've learned a great deal from developers and architects who have used the guidelines, and we're very pleased to present an updated version to you today. As a note, this video will be most helpful to those developers and architects who have used FCF design guidelines in the past. For those who are new to the FCF program, we encourage you to reach out to CDAC directly for additional information. Now I would like to introduce Bronya Clifton, the Manager of Supportive Housing and Special Projects at EOHLC since 2018. Prior to that, Bronya spent more than 2 decades as a CDAC project manager, specializing in supportive housing, and during that time underwrote many FCF deals.
Thank you, Sarah. The Facilities Consolidation Fund Program, or FCF, is one of the Commonwealth's primary tools to create housing specifically designed for individuals with developmental and intellectual disabilities. The FCF program was developed to support the movement away from large state-run institutions to community-based housing following the Olmsted's decisions credo: housing and long-term supportive services delivered in the least restrictive setting possible. The intent of the FCF design guidelines is to enhance the independence of DDS residents while emphasizing each home's livability, durability, and sustainability. Your attention to these guidelines will ensure the creation of community-based group residents that meet the needs of residents, staff, visitors, neighbors, and the host communities. EOHLC encourages all group home developers and architects to refer to these design guidelines as the very first step in the development of new housing. Now back to Sarah.
Thank you, Bronya. Now I would like to introduce Victor Hernandez, the Deputy Assistant Commissioner of DDS. Over his decades of leadership at DDS, Victor has continually been at the forefront of designing and implementing innovative solutions to the housing needs of DDS residents. Victor has been and continues to be a key ally to CDAC and EOHLC in the implementation of the FCF program and provided valuable input into the development of the revised FCF guidelines.
Thank you, Sarah. DDS's statewide residential programs serve a large and diverse population with significant and often changing needs. The individuals residing in community-based housing may receive services up to 24 hours a day to be successful and meet their ongoing needs. As a function of those services, DDS individuals may spend a better portion of their adult lives living in these community-based settings. As such, it is critical that the design of these homes allow for aging in their community by emphasizing full accessibility, universal design, and environmental sustainability. With the help of the developers and architects who are committed to the design and creation of community-based housing for DDS residents, and in strong partnership with the many service providers providing the critical on-site services, DDS can ensure that our residents are able to thrive in thoughtfully and intentionally designed homes. Now back to Sarah.
Thank you, Victor. Now I would like to introduce Resolution Architects. As a longtime architectural advisor to CDAC and EOHLC on numerous supportive housing projects, including the design and development of community-based housing for DDS residents, Resolution is uniquely qualified to offer critical guidance on the most forward-looking design techniques for ensuring that DDS residents are able to meet their housing needs. We want to thank Resolution for their significant contributions to the revised FCF guidelines and for their ongoing support. With that, I will hand it over to Paul Martell to summarize the key changes that have been made to the design guidelines.
Thanks, Sarah. It's been about 15 years since the previous design guidelines were published, and we like to think of this new set of guidelines as an evolution of the previous guidelines. This incorporates advancements in the equipment, both in the medical field and in the building and construction fields, and reflects improvements and evolutions in our thinking about building systems. So this means reflecting changes in the energy code, thinking about fresh air requirements, and all of the electronics that we use on a daily basis. And another topic that will be covered later are all the feedback from the various stakeholders about items that have worked and areas that need improvement to help inform these revisions. The previous guidelines were broken into 3 categories: scale of development and neighborhood considerations, program and design considerations, and cost parameters. You'll notice that the new design guidelines is broken out into 4 sections: basic community residence design, specific project requirements and design guidelines, project description checklist, and an appendix for area calculations. Let's take a look at the different components and an overview of what has changed. Starting with section A, basic community residence design. This section is new, although it does build on many of the previous components from the scale of development and neighborhood considerations section. Think of this as the high-level goals that influence and inform design decisions for all facilities, and this is applicable to both new construction and existing buildings. Within section A, there's 6 key pillars. Number 1, to be part of the community. Number 2, that the construction is durable. Number 3, that it incorporates the appropriate level of accessibility. Number 4, it incorporates the appropriate residential space planning. Number 5, regulatory compliance. And number 6, this is a cost-effective solution. So going into each of these different components, the takeaways should be for parts of community, we want to emphasize connections, not contrast. For durable construction, these facilities should last for 30 years with minimal routine maintenance. For appropriate levels of accessibility, different facilities will have different users, and each group of users will have slightly different needs. The goal is to serve these residents' needs both in the near term and in the future, and should anticipate future needs and incorporate adaptable elements to help promote aging in place. For the appropriate residential space planning, theme here is that this will be a home for the residents and needs to take into consideration what that means for residents as well as caretakers and how each will use these spaces. For the regulatory compliance component, obviously we have to comply with the building codes, and they are primarily in place for safety. And for cost-effective solutions, as with any public funds, we need to ensure that the development is effective but not excessive in terms of costs. Moving on from section A, we have section B with specific project requirements and design guidelines. Now, this section is an evolution of the program and design considerations section. This section still differentiates between the new construction and existing buildings. It will look familiar, but there are some changes incorporated from feedback such as ramps and second floor spaces. As a part of section B, there's also a summary table, which is intended to work in conjunction and unison with section B, and is intended to be a quick reference. Previously, this table had 4 categories, but has now been simplified into 2 categories. The previous distinctions between urban and suburban rural have been removed, and the 2 categories more closely align with the Section B guidelines. Section C is new, and we must emphasize that this is optional, but the goal here is to promote early engagement between the project team and CDAC. And finally, the appendix for the area calculations is also a new section. Since public funds are inherently competitive, this is intended to give guidance on the measurable metrics for each project in the spirit of fair evaluation of every project. Now I'll turn it over to Randy Johnson for discussion on the design-specific feedback from stakeholders.
Hi, everyone. As Paul said, this section deals with changes that resulted from feedback from stakeholders. In general, these changes are fairly explicit. And I looked up the definition of explicit, and it is clear statements with no room for confusion or doubt. And this is probably what you want in guidelines, to be given good guidance or clear guidance, to be helpful and easy to use. So one example of changes related to feedback was the general category of square footage, both in space planning programming and overall square footage of facilities. The overall increase in the size of the 4 and 5 bedroom houses was changed, as shown on the section B chart, with the upper end for the 4 bedroom at 2,850 and the upper end for the 5 bedroom at 3,200 square feet. And in the area of calculation of the overall square footage, our experience in reviewing FCF proposals was that it was all over the place. I mean, people would use completely different conventions for measuring square footage. So we found it highly advantageous to pick up on this concern, and that's the reason for the production of Appendix A, which gives very explicit information as to how you calculate the gross square footage, how you calculate net square footage of individual spaces. And this will put pretty much all projects communicating the same type of information when they describe what they're going to do. Another example of explicit information in the new guidelines is bedroom closet size. A simple thing, but the guidelines now explicitly state 16 square feet for new construction bedroom closets and 12 square feet for existing construction bedroom closets. Another example of changes due to feedback was greater definition as to the storage requirements. And here the types of storage was broken up into 2 types. General, meaning storage that is day-to-day usage, easily accessible, and remote, which is the use of say lower level spaces or attic spaces for stuff that is not on a day-to-day basis. And here the numbers are 30 square feet for the general storage and a total of 300 square feet for all storage combined. And it's pretty much the same for new construction and existing construction. Another category of changes due to feedback is the whole MEP plus fire protection guidelines. This was largely done to be consistent with EOHLC's sustainable design goals, so that an FCF project wouldn't differ that much from what would be expected from a EOHLC funded project. This is found in sections B14 to B18, with B13 also covering appliances. And the main direction here is electrification, both in appliances and the methods of heating and cooling the buildings, especially for new construction with greater options available for existing construction. Ventilation was also a new change to keep up with EOHLC guidelines. Here, the requirement is for mechanical ventilation to living spaces, both for new construction and existing construction, and also added a requirement for bedrooms to have a method of passive ventilation also. And in reviewing projects in the past, we had seen some bedroom spaces that really didn't have a window. They may have had a door for egress, but not a window. And the disadvantage here is that it's a lot harder to modulate fresh air with a door situation, which is essentially blowing in the wind, than it would be for a conventional window. Another area of information upgrade related to questions about, what is needed is in the area of emergency power. And here, section B18 is very explicit about emergency generators, what circuits should be on emergency generators. And the requirements are very similar for new construction and existing buildings. I saved the last category because it's really the most challenging, and that is the dimensional and accessibility requirements for rehabs. And of all the concerns that architects and developers have in working on existing or on FCF projects, I think the biggest challenge is, what do we do with the existing building? How do we deal with existing dimensional constraints? Somewhat lack of or challenge of making spaces accessible, and it's just a big mystery sometimes is what is the optimal solution, and a source of much debate about what is a ideal solution. Multiple sections in Part D deal with this. B4 deals with circulation, both in existing construction. B5 deals with the requirement for doorways, with reference to the Mass AAB clearance requirements for doorways. Section B8 deals for guidelines related to the provision of the multi-purpose room as to what options exist for existing construction. And there are options actually for new construction also for the multi-purpose room. And the multi-purpose room is that space, separate space for meeting family members, meeting residents, a variety of uses. B9 deals with kitchen requirements as to what needs to be accessible and the rationale for what level of accessibility should be provided. And the table in section B also covers a lot of this information. So that's just an overview of changes related to stakeholder feedback. Now I'll pass it on to Sarah, who will describe other changes related to stakeholder feedback. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul and Randy. As Randy mentioned, a portion of the feedback that CDAC received from the stakeholder community on the FCF design guidelines related less to design specific issues and more to what we are calling process items. So we wanted to take a moment to review that feedback and highlight the changes that we have made to the design guidelines as a result. The first item relates to the use of second floor space in FCF financed group homes. We've added section B21 in the design guidelines, which describes in detail how to determine whether second floor spaces are FCF eligible and provides clear examples of spaces that are and are not eligible. In response to feedback about cost parameters in the original design guidelines, we've added section B22, which does not institute a specific cap on per bedroom costs. Instead, it provides detailed guidance for managing development costs and describes how a given project's total development cost will be evaluated against those recently completed. Another piece of feedback we received was that developers and designers would benefit from having early design input to ensure the proposed projects can meet the FCF design guidelines. In response, we have developed the project description checklist, which is section C of the revised design guidelines. This allows the developer and their architect to describe the proposed project's conformance to the design guidelines and provide justification for any deviations. CDAC will review the information included in the checklist and provide feedback to the team. Finally, to better clarify which elements of the design guidelines are required, we have updated our language in the revised design guidelines using the word must to indicate requirements, whereas optional items are indicated using the words should, optional, or encouraged. The revised FCF design guidelines can be found on CDAC's website at cdac.org. Also, there you can find a tip sheet with helpful information for those who are new to the design and development of community-based housing, or for those who would like a refresher. Should you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact CDAC, EOHLC, or DDS. You can see our contact information on the screen here. Finally, we would like to thank all of those involved in this revision to the design guidelines, including the entire stakeholder community, Cassie Mann, Will Morgan, and Pearl Chan from CDAC, Randy Johnson, Paul Martell, and Dan Brainerd from Resolution Architects, Bronya Clifton from EOHLC, and Victor Hernandez and his colleagues from DDS. Thank you.